It's on.
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome everyone to Behind the Lens, a program that has been occurring every Friday that's run by the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College Chicago. And we are going to keep doing this every Friday until the museum reopens. And hopefully we'll do them then periodically after the museum reopens, just not on a weekly basis. So every Wednesday we do a session called Photos at Zoom, where we discuss works in the museum's permanent collection around certain themes. And then each Friday we meet with an artist who's perhaps working in those themes. And this week we actually talked about alternative processes, which Aimée is not so much who would we consider someone working with alternative process, like you're typically just making inkjet prints. It's what you do afterwards, but you'll get into that, I'm sure, later. But someone I think of who's really bending the field of photography and really making new forms out of photography. So just a brief introduction, and then I'm going to pass it on to you because I know you have a lot of great things to show us. Aimée Beaubien is working here in Chicago with photo-based collages, installations, and sculptures that play with the complexities of our visual perception. Her work has been exhibited around the world, including at the California Museum of Photography in Riverside, California, the Carrie Seacrest Gallery and Catherine Edelman Gallery here in Chicago, as well as our museum. And she's associate professor at the School of Art Institute Chicago. So I'm going to pass it on to you. And then if anyone has questions, please post them in the Q&A. And when it's a good time, we'll stop and ask Aimée questions. And if you just have general feedback, please post in the chat. But make sure you select the option to post to all attendees and panelists so that everyone can see your thoughts. But Aimée, I'm going to let you take it away. Let me stop my screen share and give it to you.
Okay. So can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm in my studio right now, and this is in Logan Square, which is a neighborhood in Chicago. And I thought that I would start today by just showing some slides of different work that I've made in the past, and then I'll give you a little tour of my workspace. And then we can kind of just look at in greater detail at some of the materials that I work with. So I pulled a whole bunch of things out so that we can kind of look at things together. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And I'm actually going to hide my video panel so that you can see the full screen. This is actually the room that I'm standing in right now, but this is taken in January of 2020 as I was preparing for an exhibition that opened in Chicago at the beginning of 2020. And this is the view of the same material transported into the gallery space. Some of the things suspended in this installation include copies of a garden book from the 1930s, along with dried botanical specimens collected from my tiny Chicago garden. This is another view in the same room that I'm standing in right now of various experiments in my studio while preparing for the installation. I printed my photographs onto a variety of different media types, from outdoor banner material to organza and double-sided inkjet paper. And then over the winter, I began making leaf drawings using a plant-based filament to draw around dried leaves with a 3D pen. I'm going to move back and forth between some recent projects. I'll show you some documentation of my working process and how experiments in my studio transform for exhibition. Photographs move in my work and also in this presentation. Here's a quick pan through my studio, just using my iPhone. Recently, I was listening to the audio version of How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. Jenny Odell's description of collage in chapter 4 really resonates with me, and I'm going to paraphrase here. Collage is an unstable and highly personal process of perception. Without a familiar framework, the eye roams across the scene, dwelling in small details and trying to add it all up. In the process of looking, we can notice our own construction of every scene that we perceive. This is a narrow view into my studio of woven photographs that are hanging down from the ceiling. And now I'm going to share with you just a 10-minute extract from a performative lecture that I gave last fall that I've reworked today to touch on some of my experiences with photography and collage. We navigate endless streams of photographic information with ever greater connectivity to shared experiences. Like many, I use photography to record my responses to present conditions. I manipulate my cut-up photographs into a series of moving parts, pushing their capacity to change and transform. Wild, fast-growing vines creep about the garage, slink through the yard, climb up and around the side of our house. I track their exploratory movements. All vines grow by elongating their stems, some faster than others. Charles Darwin created 5 categories based on climbing methods: leaf climbers, tendril bearers, root climbers, twining plants, hook climbers. The vine reached our second floor bedroom and climbed into my dreams. Passing through the window where I sleep, that vine entered the left side of my body, while woven elements from my work traveled in from the right. For me, a photograph is never really as static and still as it may appear. I've looked at my great-grandmother's photographs throughout my entire lifetime. She designed this charged self-portrait to control her appetite. Gert's photo collage hangs in my studio and is never far as I rework photographic information. In the 1800s, the new medium of photography intersected with collage in elaborate photo albums created by women. Sensational social networks were expressed in pre-Photoshop mashups that are currently considered the origins of photo collage. Victorian photo collage albums foreshadow present-day social networking exchanges accessed in a non-linear manner on social media channels. Technology continues to reshape the archive. I spent 1 year looking closely inside the home museum known as the Roger Brown Study Collection at the many things the Chicago painter surrounded himself with during his lifetime. The impulse to collect and what it is that we collect is fascinating. Collecting Within climbed through the stairwell inside of an exhibition celebrating the Museum of Contemporary Photography's 40th anniversary. I incorporated parts of my personal collections, including whiskey jugs scrambling up our front staircase. Stairs connect Roger Brown's first floor studio to more domestic interiors upstairs. As is the same in my work life and home life, I travel up to my home and down to my home studio. And through these interim spaces, I watch my attention shift back and forth, embracing the unexpected ways my home influences my work. I imagine how we process and transform complicated networks of visual information. I experience Roger Brown's collection as a collage. His house is a riveting assemblage that comes alive as my body passes through it. I study the carefully arranged images of domestic life constructed by William Henry Fox Talbot. Articles of China became a jumping off point. I think about what is outside of the picture frame and picture how Talbot built his fragile displays outdoors to collect enough sunlight for a very long exposure. Many photographic gestures can be traced back to this early pioneer. Geoffrey Batchen wrote of honeysuckle. Talbot crowds his camera into the bush of flowering honeysuckle, resulting in a remarkably three-dimensional picture. Looking at this image, we feel as though we too are peering into these branches, our field of vision totally filled by its light-dappled petals and stems. The photograph is at once realist and abstract, and thus points to a paradoxical aspect of photographic vision that future practitioners would learn to exploit. Gert photographed what grew around her throughout the seasons and over her lifetime. The many ways that she used her camera to discover this jack in the pulpit and to hold on to ephemeral matter, like her short-lived blooming peonies, looms large in my imagination and continues to encourage my experimentation, having profoundly affected the ways I move through the world with my camera. I cut silhouettes of vessel forms into my photographs of Roger's things. Photos, like vessels, hold meaning. And vessels, like photos, are containers for recollections. These photographic containers were held in states of suspension in an architectural niche 9 feet high by 11 feet long and 3 feet deep, connected with brightly colored paracord. I explore the dynamic and tangled attachments that form for the things we collect. I consider the weight of things, the weight of images, the weight of photographic representation, and the emotional ties they collect. My photographs cut into jug shapes and my husband's ceramic whiskey jugs. I returned to Roger's home in New Buffalo, Michigan with my extensive collection of photographs that I've taken of Roger's things. It was an otherworldly experience to animate all of this material inside the rich atmosphere of Roger's studio, where he worked and where so many makers from the school where I teach continue to work in successive residencies. My digital images are printed out and then cut apart, conjuring the disjointed experience of attention and interruption through the sharp recontextualization of collage. The immersive installations that I construct are situated at the collision between the virtual and the physical. Entirely marked by my labor and handcraft, these layered relationships between physical object, pictured object, and material image are like a hall of mirrors reflecting back conditions of distraction, compulsion, obsession, and hyperstimulation. In Michigan, I discovered Roger once had 50 different varieties of roses on his property. There, my attention shifted to the imaginative expanse between the home, museum, and garden, where lines blur between institutional and domestic, labor and leisure, propagation and contemplation, public and private. My studio is on the first floor of my home and steps away from our garden, where I yank out a stranglehold of thickly entwining morning glories. 5 years ago, I pushed my photographic collage gestures into three-dimensional sculptures and site-specific installations. Now it seems obvious that my layered collages would jump off the wall and into sculptures towering over me. It all began with the impulse to cut apart my basket photographs in order to weave photos back into basket forms. Sculpture and collage are tethered together in their material making for me. This was my first attempt at weaving together my photographs of plant life into plant-like forms. I grew this photographic vine around a footstool, side table, ceramic bowl, along the way up climbing the gallery wall. When I began extending my cut-up photographs into 3 dimensions, I grabbed what was within reach to prop material up during construction. I reached for things in my home like cups, vases, whiskey jugs. Very quickly, these things traveled with my work into the arena of exhibitions. I continue to push components around, to add, stretch, and reshape this photographic information, while specifically reacting to each new location. And I've found parallels to respond to in different exhibition environments. My hand-carved porcelain vessel on a small shelf for display, opposing a precarious stack of hot pink, orange, red furniture, a jumble of puckering sweetness punctuated with the tartness of dried lemons scattered throughout. This former home was once an artist-run project space known as Demo Project that had been slated for demolition from their very first show. I reconfigured this early installation to build a ravenous vine at the center of the home, gobbling up this raucous heap of home furnishings. Leaning, shooting, bedded, staked, drooping, pitched, and placed, sloping, jutting, braced, holding, planted, and spread. Sampling and remixing are interwoven throughout our daily experiences. Cut-up techniques are employed in literature, music, cinema, visual art, and popular culture. My pictured plant forms are constructed through processes of translation. Moments drift. I crowd in with my camera to draw connections through different conditions in a manner that I imagine information travels through systems and bodies. With new technologies, Anna Atkins reached into the unknown to arrange her flowers of the sea into imaginative compositions and on light-sensitive pages that connect science with art. In the 1840s, Atkins' specimens became the first photo book printed and illustrated with unique cyanotype photograms of British algae that she laboriously self-published in installments. I photograph the ever-changing conditions in my studio as plants dry and projects grow. Gardens are conveyors of time, from the evolutionary to the ephemeral. Inspired by the many timescales simultaneously unfolding in collections and gardens, I create paper structures that are rearranged to accommodate the unique qualities of each location for display. Because exhibitions are by their very nature short-lived, they present opportunities for continual rearrangement and representation. My installations are drawn in space with scissors to make new assertions from what has been extracted. Each show is a new occasion to explore the shifting interactivity between visual and physical sensations. Inside my home studio, plants mingle with huge tangles of cut and woven photographs. Matter dangles down from the ceiling in various states of progress and decay. My earliest photographic impulse came of a desire to draw attention to how pictures are constructed. Through the experience of collage, I investigate oscillations between photographic depiction and material form. And like many, I use photography to hold on to fleeting moments. I take whatever I've pointed to with my camera and convert it into tangled inventions that overlap and intersect. From sky to apples in a tree, experience morphs into fields of color and pattern and back again. Flipping expectations of subject, object, and motion. While individual photographic components can be easily reproduced, it's my hand that makes each of these thousands of cuts. Since plant matter coexists in my studio with photographs of plant matter, I began incorporating dried botanical elements into my installations. Death is steeped in photography and dried plants. Concentrated material investigation guides new developments in my work. Working in an exploratory manner, I crowd inside situations where I learn as I go. I understand photography as a medium capable of pushing beyond rectilinear formats and beyond the notion of a single authoritative meaning. Each fall, microscopic cells designed like scissors appear where the leaf stem meets the branch to push the leaf away. I cut leaf shapes from my photographs. I stack and bind remainders together like pages collected for a book. What happens when a plant closes its eyes? When it loses its leaves, what will the last leaf look like? For after the last leaf, I took stock of my immediate landscape and photographed specific leaves plucked from plants growing inside of my home and in the garden that surrounds. Vines trail, ramble, lean, flap, twine, weave, root, grasp, cling, and climb. I reorganized the scale of my photographs to amplify the ambition of vine movements while translating their enviable ability to embrace everything near in acts of remarkable adaptability. I translate my responses to the vitality of vines by pushing color while imagining how energy is harnessed from the sun in photosynthesis. Gardens are spaces where taxonomies and personal tastes crisscross with weather conditions and other unpredictable elements. The history of photography is a narrative interwoven with categorization, aesthetics, and unpredictability. Gardens portray time, blooming, intertwining, and dying. They are nature gathered together in public space or private refuge. Grow lights encourage some living things to develop in lieu of the sun. The effects of time on the color of girt snapshots hover in my imagination, soaked in glowing oranges and screaming in degrees of hot pinks. Radiance drops down. Dangling forms sway in air currents from bodies brushing up and passing by. Photography is used for many purposes that extend far and wide. With photography, I weave visual impressions together. In over 1,700 poems, Emily Dickinson refers to plants nearly 600 times. Her herbarium collection contains more than 400 plant specimens. And archaeologists have restored Dickinson's garden to better understand her personal physical world and source of imagination. Extending the fertile lineage that I'm connected to, I continue to look closely into an amazing garden my mother is always sowing. Decades ago, one of my photo professors would turn my photo collages over with a keener interest in seeing the construction on the reverse side. I remain mindful of how the effort behind an image is revealed or concealed. I have a greater appreciation for the incidental gestures that support the overall structure and appearance. I draw connections between different pictured conditions with pictures inside of pictures and shapes that I've reshaped. I recognize patterns in the things I photograph. Everything is interconnected, and the overall effect fights for attention to focus on a single photographic moment. I continue to experiment with altering the sensation of reading a photograph. Gardens are a solace of leisure, labor, attention. They display our fascination with nature and our desire to order it. While trying to photograph my work, I've found that the documentation often swallows itself whole, and in the process generates new images to work from. I have a timeline of photographic processes over my great-grandmother's lifetime. I continue to experiment with different ways to translate my work and bang up against the dizzying challenges of trying to encompass all of the unruly edges. As Marvin Heiferman so aptly states in the title of his book, photography changes everything. I continue to ask myself every day, what is a photograph? Okay, so that's the end of my little performance. I'm gonna stop sharing now and go back to my studio. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I can if there are questions specifically that you think we should address now, I can do that. Otherwise, I can just take you like on a little walking tour through my studio. What do you want to do?
We have a couple, but I think let's do the studio tour and then we can do them all together.
Okay, cool. Okay, so here we are. And what's behind me is leaves that I collected from Humboldt Park. At the beginning of the pandemic, my husband and I were taking walks to Humboldt Park, and I just noticed that there were still so many oak leaves that were on the ground in March. And so I started gilding the leaves and then doing leaf drawings around them. And then here you can see this is like my front window, and there's all sorts of material that go all the way from the floor to the ground pretty much. But at the tip top, you can see like some of my early experiments where I was gilding really large scale leaves. And then this is the back of a big collaborative piece that I'm working on with Terry Evans. And then these are some branches that I rescued after a storm. We have a big tree and leaves or branches are constantly falling down. And then this is my collection of paracord. Hopefully you can see that, along with a whole bunch of garden books that I use as reference. And then maybe I can do like a slightly better view of the Terry Evans piece. So this will be in a show at Catherine Edelman Gallery in July. And then this is my tiny little print space. So it's, I don't know, can you see that? So this is my printer, and I do all my printing in here, and I've got all sorts of different media types and lots of work prints in various states of progress. And then this is my primary work table. You can see it's kind of chaotic, but I have all sorts of material within arm's reach, and so I can quickly pivot from doing the filament drawings or cutting and assembling different collage elements. And then this is a little built-in break front that's filled with some artist books. And then another work table that's like on wheels, so I can kind of roam around. And then this is my my storage. So I've got some flat files, and then I have a whole bunch of three-dimensional works that are just kind of stacked up. It's not the largest studio, so I have to be kind of inventive about the ways that I use this space. So the studio is constantly changing depending on the demands of what I'm working on. And then this is my library, and I use this library. It's a huge, important tool for me. I've been collecting books since I was in high school. So I'm constantly sharing these books with colleagues and also with my students. So that's the basic tour. And then I also have like some materials that I could just hold up to my laptop if people are kind of interested in seeing the materials closer up.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. So this is a gilded leaf. So I love the idea of gold leafing leaves. And I'm just kind of doing it on one side. So some of these leaves I'm leaving by themselves, and then others I'm doing the drawings around them. And I'm picking color palettes that are kind of in line with the paracord color palette that I've been working with. And then these are the books that, these garden books that I have from the 30s. And they really boast of having beautiful color photographs of the garden. Like maybe, well, they like to say it's the first full color photographs. I think they're gorgeous. So I've been working a lot in response to these books. And then I also pulled out some small scale woven pieces. So this is just held together with the tension of the weave. And then sometimes when I use more tension, then it kind of curls up, just that tightness makes it curl. And then okay, so this piece that I'm working on with Terry, actually it's finished, but she's been photographing this bur oak tree, a 300-year-old tree. And so originally she collected a whole bunch of the leaves that had fallen around that tree, And I re-photographed them. And originally I just printed them and I was going to do double-sided photographs and put her photos on the back. But I didn't really, I ended up not going in that direction. Instead, I printed them on this gorgeous metallic paper. So they kind of almost look like bronze. I'm having a hard time getting these in front of the lens. And then I print, I print leaves on a variety of different materials. So this is, here's the organza. And the organza, it's so sheer, but when it doubles up on other materials, it's really beautiful, or the way it catches the light is really beautiful. And then I sewed it, I don't know if you can see the sewing, but I sewed it so that I could just dangle it in space. And that the first time I really incorporated that into an installation was in January. So I'm constantly like adding new elements every time I'm working on a new show. And then these are tulips that just came out of my spring garden, and I'm doing these wacky 3D drawings around them. And then my great-grandmother's photographs are always nearby. So this is one of her photos. And then when I didn't really have a studio, I only had a tabletop, I was making collages from her photographs. And then in the spaces where I extracted information, I would kind of do these very layered gouache paintings, and all the energy that's in here, just imagine it like shrinking down to that scale. It's kind of crazy. And then these are examples of just photographs of leaves. This is just a hosta from our garden, and it's about 2 scale, about the same size. But oftentimes I'm changing the size. Like the leaves I put on your house, they were huge, and they were made out of this material, which is outdoor banner material. And so it's perforated so that wind can go through it. And then I've also tested other materials. This is almost like a vellum that's double-sided, and that's some of the basic materials that I work with.
Awesome. Yeah, so full disclosure, I was lucky enough to have Aimée do an installation on my house. It was in your slideshow, the Oak Park, Illinois greenhouse. It was so fantastic. And right now, if anyone is in Logan Square, they should drive past your house and see that version on your own home. Because we can see your art in person right now if you're in the area.
Yeah.
So we have some questions if you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
We've had a couple of people ask for you to repeat the name of that book and the author of the How to Be Alone.
Oh, How to Be Alone.
Is that what you said? What it was called? The very beginning.
Oh, How to Do Nothing.
How to Do Nothing, sorry.
How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. And okay, so this is really crazy, but I'm listening to it while I'm working. So, I mean, you really should probably not do anything like while you're listening to a book about the subject of trying to do nothing, but I like having it on like while I'm actually working.
Let's see, then Dane, I'm not gonna say the last name right, but Dane is asking, how do you disassemble, pack, transport, and reassemble your 3D collages from your studio to the exhibition space? What issues do you face?
Oh boy, okay, so I try to flat pack as much as possible. So I take everything apart basically, and then I have to put it all back together again. So one of the installations that's in my studio right now, maybe I'll just take you over to it. Right now I kind of have a space marked out. It's gonna be in a window, and it's, let's see if you can see that. So this is like 10 feet tall. And then I just kind of mark out a space in my studio to figure out, to just experiment with different ways that I'm gonna occupy that space. And then because this is gonna be out of town, I'm gonna drive to St. Louis, install it. And then I have to bring all of my packing materials with me. So I kind of have to have an idea of how much materials are gonna be with me. And then, I'll leave all the packing materials and they'll ship it back. But basically they'll just have to take it apart, and all the flat photographs, are easy. And then I'll just have to build some strong boxes so that nothing gets collapsed. But I will say that Karen at MoCP thought it was hilarious that I delivered all of my work in giant garbage bags, but basically like giant garbage bags, like plastic bags. I pulled like all the big woven sculptures. I just packed them in my car that way so that I could smash in as much as possible in my car. So for me, it's always like really important to have opportunities to occupy different spaces locally, because I can brainstorm and figure out different things that I would need to be prepared for if I'm shipping something or traveling a greater distance. So I learned a lot through every installation.
Great. Sam Jessner has asked, he says, I've noticed across these lectures that many photographers create works that are referential or based on the works of others. Why did you choose to build from Roger Brown's work? Do you think creating works based on the work of others, like Roger's work in your work, reduces originality or something else?
Oh, that's a good question. I was presented with an opportunity to spend time at the Roger Brown Study Collection, so I didn't really have a plan in mind. But what I really responded to was the ways that he displayed things. And this is a museum that anyone can get access to. You just have to have an appointment. But the curator of that collection gave me a key so that I could kind of go whenever I wanted. And I just loved kind of the way that his collection was so democratic. It was, you know, there wasn't any hierarchy between like $150,000 Darger drawing that was hanging from the ceiling and then like a 2-cent piece of postcard or advertisement. And I think that I used that experience to really reflect on the ways that I collect things and the way that I observed my great-grandmother collecting things, and how those collections influence the ways that we make work. And then while I was doing that residency, I was presented with the opportunity to show at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. And then because that was about the history of the collection, I started thinking about different ways that photographs of collections have appeared in photo history. And so things just started overlapping. So I guess like at the onset, I wasn't thinking I'm gonna make work about Roger Brown. And I don't think when you're looking at that work, you think, oh, this is obviously inspired by Roger Brown. It's more just inspired by the idea that the things that we collect are really personal and idiosyncratic, and they inform or they have a lot to do with our personalities. And I wanted to know more about that.
Great. Whoops. Figuring out my video here. Okay, so a few more. Adam Brooks says hello. And Adam says,
I've known Adam since I was an undergrad.
A lot of nice Chicago artists on right now. Adam says, because I've known your work for a long time, I'm wondering how you think about the transition from the extremely corporeal focus of your early work to this work. Obviously, there are issues of growth and decay in common, but it's a considerable distance from the confrontational nature of that early work.
That is so true. I think about, I mean, all the work that I made before was about the body, and I used my own body I photographed my own body, and I was really thinking about the politics of representing a female figure. And now I think what I'm doing is I'm really interested still in the way that the body navigates these spaces. So when I'm designing a space in an exhibition, I'm thinking about all these different points of contact, like all these different sight lines that are happening, and all these different sensations that someone would have when they first encounter this space. And I mean, like, to me, I'm still thinking about the body, but I'm not photographing it in the same way. And Adam's right, you know, like I'm still thinking about life cycles and how everything is interconnected. And I keep thinking that the body is gonna come back. So I don't know, stay tuned. I love all of that early work, so I keep thinking about it. Thanks for mentioning it, Adam.
Liz Chilson is wondering if you could describe the gilding process and how you apply it, and also working with the 3D drawing material and how it attaches to the plants.
Oh, so let's see. I don't know. It's just trial and error with the drawings. So it's like the filament is heated up, and you have a short window to attach it to something, to attach it to itself. And again, I think it's just kind of about tension. So here, I'm just drawing and I'm mimicking the lines that exist in the veins of the leaf. And as I'm going along, I'm trying really hard to make sure that it's still attached, because oftentimes the leaf can kind of just pop out. And then the gilding, gilding's really easy, but I've noticed that some leaves don't work as well. So you're putting like a special adhesive material on, and then it dries for a few minutes, and then it gets a little tacky, and then you're adding the gold leaf on top, and then you rub it on so that it's a good attachment. I hope that helps. But it's super easy to kind of figure these things out. I mean, I'm constantly exploring new materials and experimenting. So I don't know, I'm not really afraid of making mistakes, and I'm always learning something from the mistakes that I make.
And that 3D printer is making the stuff around the tulip too, right? Or is that something else?
It's not a 3D printer, it's like a pen. So I think it's like these things are marketed towards kids, but I love it. It's so much fun to work with.
And Michael Praise was asking about the stuff around the tulips and leaves. So I think that's, yeah.
I'll get my pen so you can see it. I should have, I don't know. I was talking to a friend and she said, oh, you should do a demo on 3D pens, but you can just find them on YouTube, the demos. So the one thing is it does have to be hooked to electricity. And then you can control the heat of it. And I'm using a plant-based filament. I'm sure there's still plastics in this, but trying to do the best I can. And I'm buying them in big spools, and the spools are built for the 3D printers, but I kind of need the big spools because I'm going through a lot of this material.
Awesome. So Mark Bello is asking about, have you addressed the vogue for simplicity? So I think just thinking about maybe like a trend for more minimal work right now, and if your work intended to last in any particular form for any length of time.
Ah, interesting. I am definitely a maximalist, and occasionally I'll do standalone pieces. I showed one standalone piece in this presentation, and that was something that I made specifically for MoCP's benefit auction, like the last one. And I don't know, I don't think of it as I don't think about trends. I mean, I think about, like what I'm excited about. And I feel like I'm just mirroring the intensity of visual information that I'm encountering in my everyday life. And in a way, I'm narrowing it down to, at the moment, one subject matter, which is dealing with living things in my garden specifically, but other locations too. What was the other part of that question?
I think you answered it. Essentially,
okay.
How you're considering, I guess, how your work will age over time.
Oh yeah, aging over time. Okay, so I have done a couple permanent installations, and usually people ask me, how do I deal with dust? And it's, dust is not a problem. I just use a feather duster. And I'm not too worried about the aging of things. I mean, color's fugitive. All color photography is going to fade when exposed to different light sources. So that's just the nature of the beast. Yeah, it's not under glass, it's not protected, but I have a lot of photographs that are hanging in my studio that have been hanging here for many years, and they're holding up. I'm not too worried.
I think that leads nicely to Poppy Lechner's question about how you feel about the rectangle in your work or the hard edges compared with the organic platforms you work with.
Oh, that's a great question, because I mean, the rectangle has been something that I've been fighting since I was a baby artist. So as I was learning photography in the darkroom with silver gelatin prints, like I would generate a whole bunch of print material, but I was always cutting it up because I just wanted to defy the rectangle, and I wanted to imagine that my photographs could be in a variety of different shapes. So that's something that I've been working with for, God, since the 80s. So for me, it's very unusual to make something that's rectilinear. And it's kind of fun when I do, when I surprise myself and I'm like, oh yeah, this needs to exist in a rectangle.
I love when you hang them, like the one right behind you, where you have little kind of snapshots waving. And when you did your MoCP installation, you had those.
Yeah.
It was almost like some humor in the piece of like, oh yeah, this is made out of photographs. This is photography. So,
Right.
and then seeing your presentation where you're referencing Anna Atkins and the history a lot, and photographers photographing plant form through history. I love that you keep the rectangular shapes. So it's just my opinion on that.
Well, I think people forget that they're looking at photographs, you know, when they're looking at my work. It's like it's just a whole bunch of material.
Priya Cambly's daughter, Soha, who is 9 years old, wants to know how you put your installations back the right way once you take them down.
That's an excellent question. So I'm constantly reusing this material, and I guess there's no right way. Like I take it apart, and I kind of just organize it based on subject. So all woven things go in one area of the flat files, all leaves go in another area of the flat files, so that they're easy for me to access when I'm getting ready for another exhibition. But every time I show the work, it's a brand new configuration. So nothing gets installed the same way twice. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of fun too. You're responding to the space, right?
Totally.
Nanette Freeman wants to know if you ever have other people weave for you.
No. Periodically, if I have a really intense deadline and I have to generate a lot of photographs and I can't keep up with the printing, I'll hire a student and then they'll print everything and then they'll trim the white borders off. But I've tried, like my husband's like, oh, come on, you can get someone to help you. But I've been using an X-Acto for like 40 years. So I have a lot of skill, like unrecognized skill. Like I don't think I realized how much skill is required until I asked someone to try and do it. And then I just took all their work apart, you know, and I just thought, I'm not gonna pay someone, you know, and then have to worry about this, you know, the standards of it, because I am very particular. Like you may not know it, but there's a lot of editing that's involved. I throw a lot away or I put it off to the side because it's not right.
Yeah, and I got to see you firsthand when you were installing on our house do that. You came with a lot and you left with a lot. Yeah. It's so cool to watch. Chicago artist Judy Natal says, I'm thinking of the book, The World Without Us, and its thesis that nature will thrive, surpass, and overcome the human-built environment if given a chance. Can you speak to the density of nature that is represented in your work?
Yeah, I agree with her. And I think that that's why I'm so obsessed with this vine that's growing around our house. Because every year, like I cut back a little, but it's so tenacious. Like it's gonna win. Like it's gonna envelop our whole house. I know it at some point. And it's just so strong. And I admire like how vital it is. I don't know. You know, I listened twice to Richard Powers' book about trees. Gosh, now I'm blanking out on the name of it, but it's this amazing novel, and it's all about each chapter kind of like, it keeps going back and forth between these different storylines, but there are all these people that are trying to protect trees. Ah, the overstory, thanks. It's so great, but I listened to it twice back to back while I was working in the studio. And you know, like at one point in the story, there's one of the characters just says, like, basically the best thing you can do for trees is leave them alone. Like, just leave the environment alone, and they'll thrive. Like, it's this whole cycle that they need to go through. So I don't know. I have so many different fantasies about the way that the natural world in my imagination exists. And I think that part of what I'm doing is building this other world. And it's, you know, there's a sense of humor about it, but there's also like this sadness that I have. Like, you know, in my lifetime, you know, like, can I imagine what the last leaf is going to look like that I'm going to look at? Like, I'm really like thinking about things like that. And how does photography like make me like manage my imagination? And I'm, you know, like manipulating the color palettes that are really emotionally driven.
Yeah, I can tell you your mood kind of changed thinking about that. So you can tell how sincere you are in that. Stab some more and try to figure out which one makes the most sense right now. Okay, Marzena Abrahamic asked if you can talk about how the range of different subjects are connected. Do you work with pictorial typologies? Sorry.
I guess like the way that I'm thinking about everything being connected now is just in this very loose category, like a collection. You know, like I collect photographs. I'm constantly making photographs. My husband's constantly making whiskey jugs. That has become a collection in our home. And I'm constantly trying to give whiskey jugs to my friends. And so I also think about a garden and how a garden is just an extension of someone's personal collection. And right now we're reorganizing our backyard garden. And it's been super interesting to see what plants have survived and how plants have moved through that space. We transplanted a whole bunch of things from our old garden, and a lot of those materials came from friends in Michigan that have an amazing garden. So I think about how it's connected to friendships and relationships. I guess that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Charlie Simokaitis says, you mentioned that the photographic documentation of your work is often swallowed up, becoming possible elements for future pieces. With this in mind, have you considered incorporating a video element in your installations to either project previous projects or to possibly provide a live feed to underscore or augment the way bodies move through your work?
That is a super interesting idea. I love that idea. No, I mean, I make time-lapse videos on my iPhone and post those oftentimes on Instagram. I kind of use Instagram as a sketchbook. It's a really good reference for me too, to kind of just look back at what I was working on at a particular time. I love the idea of potentially incorporating video, but that's not really my skill set. Who knows, maybe I'll learn something new. I think often a lot about Franz West's adaptables. So he made these sculptures and he really wanted the audience to interact with these sculptures. And so he provided like photographs that demonstrated friends interacting with the sculptures, or even made films about them. And so I'm often thinking about that, like that seems like such a great strategy. But I do think that, I mean, I'd like to think that with my installations, people are invited in, and I'm constantly thinking about the ways bodies would navigate the space. So I don't know, maybe installations next, who knows? Ooh. I mean, video installation, I don't know.
I think we have time for one more question, and then I'll read you a couple comments that Kathy Edelman says she just cut down a gnarly bush in her garden that was dead that's available if you would want it.
Ooh, that sounds great.
Sonia Thompson says it'd be wonderful to see you take over greenhouses for a permanent evolving installation, and thank you for your energy.
Oh, thanks. That's amazing.
And then I think this good last question is from Michael Praise. And a lot of people are asking about the recording. I should just say that all of these recordings that we're doing with every artist are available on the museum's Vimeo page, which I put the address to that in the answered section, but it's just vimeo.com/MoCP Chicago. And you can go to our homepage and there's a button there too. So if anyone wants to watch this again later, they can go there. Final question is from Michael Praise. He says, you mentioned several times that you listen to books while working. When do you get your ideas and when do you develop your ideas? How mentally demanding is your manual work?
Oh, I talk to my students about this all the time. I do like the kind of like intellectual heavy lifting early in the morning. And then I do the repetitive task related works in the afternoon, usually after lunch. My mind's kind of like spacing out. And so when I'm in that spacing out mode, that's when I'm listening to a whole bunch of material. So I'm listening to audiobooks, podcasts, lectures, like I'm just kind of feeding myself. And this is, you know, out of my own personal interest, but also really driven by my students' interest too, because I really want to share as much experiences with other people's making as possible with my students, just because I'm curious about why people make things. So I'm always I'm listening to biographies oftentimes and watching documentaries. So I try, I guess I just pay attention to my energy level when I'm working in the studio and when I can take information in and when I really need to be focused and making really important decisions. And usually at the end of a studio day, like I have this little trick that I do with myself, and I'll do some really bold, brazen move at the end of the day, like something that feels really risky and like maybe I've just ruined everything. And then when I wake up the next morning, I try to look at it with a critical view and ask myself questions like, is this working? Why is it working? If it's not working, how do I need to manipulate it? So I don't know, I just really try to pay attention to how I feel and how I feel things are going. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. I've been smiling the whole time through your presentation, and now I just want to go get in my garden. So thank you so much for your awesome work and energy. I'm such a fan. And I should tell everyone that next week we are doing a studio visit with Carlos Javier Ortiz following our Photos at Zoom session on Wednesday on documentary photography. And we hope you all can join us because Carlos has been photographing the protests going on right now and has been a big activist in the issues behind the protests for a long time. So I think his work will be very inspiring at this current moment. So we hope that we see you all here every week. We'll do a studio visit on Friday and a discussion around collection works on Wednesdays. So just follow mocp.org for all those events. But thank you, Aimée, and it's always really great to see you. And I can't wait to see what comes next from you with your work with Terry Evans too. That's very exciting.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. I love you guys. This program is so great.
Awesome. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye.